Hey, welcome everybody to our Tuesday Live, and you're going to be blessed first time ever with my guest that's on here today. And he had an article recently in the Harbingers. We're going to be getting into the tech industry. We're going to be looking at various things over our next little bit of time together. You're going to be really blessed by this. But in this Harbingers article, the title of it was "The Salt and Light Must Not Check Out, Tune Out, or Recoil into Silence When the World Needs Us Most." The message that we have. He wrote, "Recently, I've heard more statements of distrust. It concerns me. Have you heard it too? I don't know who to believe or trust. I just tune it all out. I've stopped listening to the left. I've stopped listening to the right. I don't read any news because I don't know who's telling the truth. I turned off the media altogether." Then he goes on and says, "It's a reflection of our ability to trust. Why is that a problem?" Listen, we're going to have a great time today. I promise you're going to be blessed. Please welcome Joe Kerr to the program. Joe, great to have you here. First time ever with us. I mean, we've known each other, but first time we've known
each other a bit. Yeah, it's first time for the chairs to be reversed. We've had you on our program several times and had that pleasure to interview you. I thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show.
This is going to be really terrific. And folks, hold on to your seats is what I would say. So we're going to get into a lot of different topics today. But first of all, I'm just going to have Joe introduce himself a little bit. On the Harbingers Daily, it says Joseph Kerr is an editor, radio host, freelance writer, apologist, White House press corps journalist. Joseph was also involved in writing, editing, and co-authoring 17 books. With that, Joe, when I look back over the past several years since we first met, various conversations that we've had, and some of them were in the world of finances. And then just before we came on, you were telling me a little bit more about the whole tech industry and what you actually did. And I just find it so fascinating because what you did and your knowledge and understanding of things is pretty profound. It's hard to find someone who actually speaks from experience in doing it. Can you just, I don't want you to scare everybody to death, but we talked a little bit about 2023. If you want to, we'll bring in hope because people are definitely going to need it. But can you fill us in? What was it you did? I asked you, Joe, if I remember right, you were involved with Wall Street or something like that. And then you said, well, let me fill you in. So can you fill in all of our viewers?
I was. This has been since the 90s. I still actively trade the market and day trade depending on how busy I am in a particular week. We'll pick a day and watch the market. But for a number of years, I was on the sales and marketing staff for the largest technical analysis firm on Wall Street. There are two different types of analysis for figuring out what the market has done and where it's headed. And everybody would like to know which way the market's going to go. And the analyst, and I was more of an analyst, they analyze the direction and trends in the market based on basically two different areas. One is called fundamental analysis and one is called technical analysis. Fundamental analysis is the basic workings of a company. How big is the company? How much money are they making? Did they fire the CEO? Is somebody going to jail? As long as the company's making money and doing what they're supposed to, that all falls under fundamental analysis. How big the company is their stock price, is this number? That's fundamental. Technical analysis, you'll frequently hear people refer to trends and data. Those are things where we're looking at a chart or a graph, and we'll look back and say, okay, well, every time there was a inversion of the interest rates, for example, the short and long-term rates, every time that happened within 2 years, there was a recession. If you look back over the last 40 years, that's true. That is technical analysis. That's looking at a chart and saying, well, this happened before. I wonder if it's going to happen again. So we find the number of times that happened, and then you extrapolate forward and say, based on how many times it's happened, there's a pretty good chance that if we encounter this same situation again, we're going to get the same result. It's It's that simple. Obviously, we're not going to be talking about individual stocks and things. Otherwise, I have to give that long disclaimer about I'm an idiot, and so are all the other people on Wall Street. So don't take my opinion about anything and don't invest your money. But thankfully, we're not going to go into individual stuff. But I was involved in providing that service, that technical analysis, a particular type of technical analysis called Elliott wave analysis. It's all based on Fibonacci ratios. Those of you who are mathematicians would recognize that. They're just recurring patterns that we see in everything from nature to the stock market. And we sold that advice to people in hedge funds, large banks, trading firms, and individual investors on Wall Street. So I was in New York 3-4 times a year, and sometimes more frequently, depending on what was going on. Had friends in all of those buildings, including the towers that fell in New York. Several of the folks that I knew back in the 90s perished in that accident, but that was my life for a number of years, and I'm not doing that now for any company. I still watch the markets on my own. I was privileged to become a member of the White House Special Media Press Corps under past. I have to be careful. Yeah, the doors are all locked and we're still in the air. Yeah, we are. Okay. Yeah, I was invited to be a member of the White House Press Corps, a special media press corps under President Trump. I usually say 45. That's what everybody called them on special media. Special media is just anything that wasn't television or print media that you see in that room when you see a press briefing. People who do radio, people who do programs like this, influencers and others online. Those are all special media press corps. And we would have Zoom call press conferences just like you would see the other conferences, except we weren't actually in the room. We were doing all those like this.
That's pretty fascinating. So your knowledge of where we've been and where we're going is you have some depth of knowledge there. And understanding where we've been. A little bit of experience. Yeah, and the things that you've been involved with, from technology to being able to do projections, whether it be the stock market or whatever it is. We look at the whole monetary system. You look at 2023. You were part of this press corps with Trump. I mean, you start looking down the whole line. We'll come back to this because I think some people might get a little bit frightened. So I want to make sure they don't. I'm going to ask you, when we look at 2023, 2024, listen, I don't know when the rapture is going to take place, but people are concerned. They start looking at money. What are we going to do if there's a digital currency? If we're not raptured yet, how am I going to protect myself and so forth? We'll come back to that a little bit later because I want to get to a few more things first. But real quick, when you projected the 2023, your thoughts, I mean, you don't have to tell me if you think it's going to get too scary, No. Well, I'll let you say it if you want to.
Let's put it this way: things always get a little scarier before something really exceptional happens. Biblically, that's always been true. So would we expect things to get better and better and better right up until the rapture? That's not what I read in the Bible. So I would say, if anything, yes, it will get worse. I can tell you that the friends that I have that I still stay in contact with in the financial markets, most of them are seasoned professionals. So I wouldn't use the word frightened, but they're concerned about 2023. And I don't know a single one of the people at a very high level in finance, from hedge funds to the large banks to some of the other firms that trade currencies internationally. I don't know any of them that do not think there will be a recession in 2023. I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, I watch a lot of financial news coming from a secular standpoint. And many of them will say it's not that we're looking at going into a recession in 2023. A lot of them will say we've been in a recession. Their concern is going into what we would have termed in the past a depression, that things do not look great. But that being said, We'll come back to this because people are going to need to be encouraged and find out, what they can do. And I love how you said that. When you look at the rapture, how would you expect things to go before you get to the rapture? Better and better and better now. I love how you said that. No, they're going the way the Bible tells us they would go, so we can be encouraged and look up and lift up our head because our redemption draws near. Okay, Joe, here we go. So we look at what we should be doing as believers. We're followers of Christ. We look to the Bible to have an understanding, to be able to navigate this life, just day-to-day living, but also looking to the prophecies, because we can tell, it appears we're in a particular time that we're about ready to be called home. With that, in our conversations, we were able to put together a title for today, Pitfalls, was the dangers every watchman will face. And you wrote this article about being salt and light and so forth. Really, really good article that is on harbingers. You brought up several different things. How does a nation lose the truth? You wrote, don't check out, speak out. We need to be light in the darkness and salt. And recognize we live in spiritually dark ages. I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in here. This morning I'm doing my devotion, and I'm in Daniel chapter 10. I've read Daniel many times. I've taught on it. I'll be teaching on it again starting in a few more weeks. But in there, it was just so startling. I even told my wife, I've read this, 100 times. You have this spiritual power of darkness, the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece. And it's very clear as you're reading Daniel, when the angel is withheld because it's doing battle with these two heavenly hosts of the dark places. And then at the end he says, hey, I've got to go back and fight. I only have Michael. And I'm assisting Michael in this spiritual dark thing. So you wrote about spiritually dark ages. We can see this darkness on the land, but there's spiritual pitfalls. A lot of what happens in prophecy is there's just quite frankly, there's some really nutty stuff that's out there. And people gravitate toward it because it itches the ears and they buy into it and it gets them off the truth of the Bible. But I know that's a lot out there. So you want to tackle the salt and light first?
We can. I have written a good bit about what it means to be a watchman. I was the managing editor at I Am a Watchman. Many of your listeners and followers have seen us at the conferences over the years. And everything that comes for that topic for watchmen, there was just kind of a rev moment for me where y'all use rev in California, right? There was a revelation. Okay.
Sure.
There was kind of a rev moment for me where God said, look, what does it mean to be a watchman? What does a watchman do? And we use that term, and a lot of people have attached to it, and they hear Amir refer to being a watchman. They hear you say it. They hear Jack Hibbs and many others that use that. And what does a watchman do? Well, in the Old Testament times, watchmen were responsible for the safety of the city. They watched and they warned and they made sure that the city was safe. They had to have two very important characteristics. They had to have balance because, let's face it, it was, they were walking a wall that was made out of cobblestones in the dark, and they had to have vision because the telescope wouldn't be invented for another 2,000 years, and night vision wasn't invented until, 1930? So these were guys who had a very difficult job, but if we bring those two principles, balance and vision, forward into our times, how much more accurate is that? For watchmen need to have balance, and you just referenced that, not get off into the weeds and get crazy. I mean, I know some folks who identify as watchmen, and they spend most of their time in front of their computer watching whatever is the latest bombastic video, and they get to the point where that's all they talk about at parties. That's all people expect to come out of their mouth, and nobody wants to hang around them because they just get weird. And what's the worst possible thing that you can imagine that could happen to a watchman? Nobody wants to listen to them. That's the worst possible thing that could happen to a watchman is people won't listen to you. You're so weird and so far off in the weeds, they don't want to talk to you, or they don't speak your language. And so what I've spent a lot of time doing with articles and things that we did at I Am a Watchman was pulling people back from the edge of that and saying, look, you've got to be relatable. You've got to speak the language that people understand, because if you cannot do that well, then you're not a watchman. You're just one more voice in the mess, and nobody's going to listen to you. So those two things, balance and vision, fit very nicely into the salt and light. Balance is really that principle of salt, and vision is really the principle of light. So when we're talking about a watchman has to have those principles, we can get into that more. I've got 9 or 10 of them that I use on a regular basis to describe what that means to have balance and what that means to have vision. But that is the way I see it, where watchmen have their greatest opportunity, but also their greatest danger is what you just described, where we can become so focused on that one thing that people don't want to listen to us.
Yep. That was really good. In fact, I do want to ask you what those 9 are before we get to digital currencies and then turn it over to questions.
Okay.
Because I think it's really helpful. You know, one problem, you know, you take someone like me, Joe, I'm out here almost every day, pretty much every day doing something like this. And I'm already labeled with the fringe just because I'm saying, hey, Jesus is coming back. So because
you brought me on and pushed it over the edge.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just, it goes with the territory, because there are many fringe people who get into this Bible prophecy. And because of that, I think we need to be extra careful to make sure, yeah, we need to tell people Jesus is coming back. Never forget that he came the first time, because he's coming back. But if you don't know him in his first coming, if you haven't been forgiven, then his second coming is not going to go good for you. So we always need to remember the gospel. He is coming back. We need to give the message out there. But you brought it up. You go to a party, nobody wants to hear from you because you've always got you've been out in the weeds and the things aren't real solid. So I totally get it. And because I got to deal with it in my own mind, in my own life all the time, and all the different theories people send me to, because I get a lot of different theories.
I'm sure.
But with that, let's go through you said you have 9 principles?
I think 9 or 10.
Well,
let's see how many of them we get in
Let's
here.
see how many of them we get in. We'll go for a few minutes, and then we'll get to the digital currency, and then we'll take some questions. So I'll keep looking at the clock. Okay, go.
Okay.
Number 1.
Well, let's do this way. Salt, you have to understand in ancient times what salt was. And you hear a few of them. If you've ever heard a sermon on being salt and light, you've heard a few of them. Yeah. That salt is a preservative and salt inhibits decay. Well, salt was used for a lot more things in Old Testament times than that. It was a flavor enhancer. We knew that. It was a nutrient. They used it to sanitize and remove odors. Anybody who's ever been a chef knows that if you put salt in something that's bitter, it actually removes some of the bitterness. The ancients used it to repel pests. There's actually records of that in Egypt. It was used as an exfoliant. When a baby was born, the first thing they would do was wash them down with salt. It was used as a water conditioner, even back then. It was used to relieve bug bites and to extinguish fires. So salt had a lot of uses. It was a very valuable commodity in that time. And as watchmen, we have to ask ourselves that question: how salty are we? If you went through that list, are you a sanitizing agent at your office, at your school? Do we remove the bitterness when we walk into a room, or do we bring it? How salty are we? You know, it's an interesting verse. We see Jesus mentioned, you are the salt of the earth in Matthew chapter 5. Mark records the same thing, but he adds a very interesting line. He says at the end of that verse, you're the salt of the earth. And what if the salt lost its saltiness? Then what do you do with it? But Mark adds this: have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. Wouldn't it be great If we could just get all the watchmen on the same page, all the people who are talking about Bible prophecy, and just be at peace with the fact that we're never all going to agree. I mean, you and I obviously have it all figured out and we've got it all right, but all the rest of the heretics, we can't help them. Well, that's a really precarious position to put all of us in, because none of us are going to get it all right. I would like to believe I've got most of my theology and eschatology in order, but there are things that I have to look at them and go, well, I'm not sure about that one. I think we interviewed Francis Chan when we were doing our radio program, and he made one of the best observations I've ever heard. He said, I think when we're all sitting around the coffee shop in heaven, the phrase that you're going to hear second most, first most is holy, holy, holy. But the second most common phrase that you're going to hear, especially among preachers, is, well, got that one wrong.
Huh.
We have to be willing to admit that we don't have it all figured out.
I think that's great.
Yeah. Here's your 10. We'll just run through them in that order real quick. Under balance, the danger of imbalance, meaning you just out of balance in life. You don't put the right emphasis on things, whether that's in your job, in the world, in the body of Christ. You're out of balance. False alarms, the kind of the boy who cried wolf syndrome. It's something new every week. What's the newest? It's Taco Tuesday, Rapture Wednesday, Heretic Thursday. There's always something. You give so many alarms, people don't listen anymore. Another one is lost balance. You lost your balance. In other words, you're overwhelmed. And that's what that article talks about. The point at which people have heard so much from so many different directions and they don't know what to believe, that they just say, I'm turning off all of it. That's a dangerous thing. And that's not where Christians should be. So that's one point. Another one is ministry imbalance. How many ministries have we seen that were led by people that seem to have their act together, but they spent so much time in ministry that they lost their own family? There's another one under balance that's very dangerous, and that is friendly fire, killing the other watchman. One of the things that we said with one of our guests was we were talking about that principle of everybody attacking everybody else, because if you're not exactly like me in every single point of eschatology, then I can't come to your conference. I can't be your friend. We can't fellowship. And one of us made the comment, yeah, who needs lions? Feed the Christians to the Christians.
Yeah, I think
that's a dangerous thing.
Friendly fire is the hardest thing to deal with. I know that from being a pastor of a church. It's like, man, there's more that comes from believers, people who are part of a church, than there is from the secular world. Even with things like this, talking about the second coming of Christ, it's, man, if you don't say exactly the way they want you to say it, you have a different thought process on how things are going to unfold. It's like, look out.
That is so true. Well, those are the 5 under balance. Under vision, there is vision fits with light, and people need to understand that, kind of like we talked about salt. There is no scientific definition of darkness. Darkness is described as merely the absence of light. And this is a critical truth behind the biblical principle there. God didn't choose the example of salt and light by accident. He could have said we're tree bark and roseberries, but he chose salt and light on purpose. The reason he said light is because in the Bible, darkness is presumed. In other words, darkness is always there. The crucial truth behind the illustration of light is that it's not the problem. Problem is not that the darkness is present. The problem is the light is missing. So we don't walk into a room and turn on a dark switch.
Yeah.
We walk into a room because it's already dark. We turn on the light switch. So as watchmen, as people who are called to be children of the light, as we follow the light, and John chapter 1 talks about Jesus was the light. What are the dangers there? The danger is vision. It's blindness. And there are many different kinds of blindness. There are some people who are born blind. Their world is basically, we would describe it as dark. They've never seen anything. They don't know color. They've just never seen. That statistically is actually a small percentage of the people who are blind. The majority of the people who are blinded because of some accident, disease, something that happened to them that caused their blindness. And their blindness, although they're legally blind, they can't drive or, read a book or something because of the blindness. Most of their vision is not total darkness. Most of their vision is impaired. And that's another danger for Watchmen, because whether it's from scar tissue, whether it's from the spots of all the things that happen to us, getting into your vision, so many other things can get in the way of being able to see clearly. So that's why the light is so important. So just using that analogy of vision, there's total blindness, and that can come from rage, disappointment. You mentioned as a pastor, offense. How many people have left churches because they were offended? That is pulling yourself completely out of any spiritual influence. You are walking into the darkness. You are going to be spiritually blind. And the danger there is, as watchmen, that we begin to view the world as a battlefield instead of a mission field.
That's a great
the world is not the enemy. Yeah. They are our mission field. It is going to be dark. We understand that. We know they're not going to agree with us, but they're the mission field. They're not the enemy.
I like the way you put that. Satan is our enemy. God's desire is that none should perish. I love how you put that. The world is our mission field. And sometimes, when we look at the things that are taking place right now and have been, for especially the last several years, you look at just the genderism that's happening. We can see the immorality and abortion and all the things are just in our face, where right has become wrong and wrong has become right. We're like, man, that's all the enemy, because we're on opposite sides. But Christ came into this world. Romans chapter 5, verse 8, God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. He came into a world that hated him, but this was the mission field. And it's hard. I believe it's not always easy for us to remember that, because of the emotions and the things that we see that are going on that are wicked. And sometimes, Joe, I think it's hard to make that, to walk through it, say, okay, I've got to love them, I got to care for them. They need to know Christ. Sin is real. I can't just pretend like it doesn't exist and do a big group hug for the sin. And it's trying to find a balance there in that. You already dealt with the balance, but in that, and understanding, it's having the love of God toward those who are perishing. It's a tough thing to do in our minds and our humanness.
That is for sure. But it is still a command. One of the things that's missing the most in many of our individual lives, but also in churches, is that balance. We talk a lot among some of your other guests and people that we know, that there are some churches who don't ever touch Bible prophecy. They want to stay out of that area. There are some churches that are very political, and that's all they want to talk about. And there's a balance. We have to find that area where we're covering all of the things. We're preaching the whole counsel of God, not overlooking any other part, but not leaving anything out that is crucial to understanding what's going on in the Bible. I preached in our church this last Sunday because the pastor was out of town. We were talking about Nehemiah, because we're going verse by verse through the book of Nehemiah. And I had a blast with Nehemiah too, because it's so connected to Daniel chapter 9. So we get to talk about Bible prophecy a little bit. I'm the only one who typically brings that in, just because I'm that person in the rotation, and it's kind of fallen to me, and I love that opportunity. But there are some churches where folks go, and we've been guilty of this. Okay, let's just say it. When we have meetings and people come and they'll say, well, my church doesn't talk about this. What should I do? And the standard answer is, you need to get to a church where they do, as if there's just one down the street in every city. Mm-hmm. That it's just a matter of, well, just go pick that other one. Watchmen understand that you may be the only one on the wall that understands what's going on out there. You're the only one who has the whole field of vision. You're the only one who sees the enemy in the places that nobody else up on the wall can see. Sometimes you need to be satisfied with that and do the job and bloom where you're planted. Do the job where God put you. Don't expect your church to be the perfect church. Do what God's called you to do. Be the voice in the darkness where you are, and be satisfied with that. Don't expect that you're going to be in the perfect church surrounded by the perfect people who speak exactly what you want to hear. That's a rare occurrence. And sometimes we're guilty of quickly dismissing that and not putting people in a position where we say, you know what, be responsible for where you are. Don't go looking for that perfect place that has it all together. The other points with light fit that. One of the problems with vision is vision that's out of focus, letting the immediate dictate what's important instead of what's actually important. Another one is blurred vision. We can talk about the new normal. That's just blurred vision. That is people who are losing their focus. There's impaired vision, and that's the concept of deceptions versus distractions. Is it deception or is it just distraction? And we can talk about that some more. But the other one is just very simple. Number 10 is just sleeping when it's time to be awake. Romans 13 says, you know the time that the hour has come to wake from sleep. Wake up, for our salvation is nearer now than when we believed. That's Romans 13:11. Mm-hmm. But as a watchman, those points keep coming up every place I go. And we as watchmen have to understand our responsibility in all those areas.
Great. Thank you, Joe. In fact, I would like to just reiterate this one on being a watchman and wherever you are, because a lot of people who watch this online, there's no church within 2 hours of where they live. There's a lot of different things that go on, or it's really hard to even find a church that's biblically sound. People say to me all the time, I can't find a church that teaches Bible prophecy. Should I just leave it? In that case, I would say, no, listen, if they're biblically sound, they believe in your salvation is through Christ alone, you believe in the Trinity, biblically they have the foundations right, then you should stay there. If they've gone woke, that's different. But being a watchman, there's not a lot of watchmen that are out there. And I look at it exactly like you do. If God's planted you there, he's giving you that heart and the mind and the ability to look at the scriptures and know that Jesus is coming again and wanting to help wake people up to that. Hey, God's placed you there. It's like being a light, right, yeah. Joe? So I've said this many times in years past when I've taught on being salt and light. God has a lamp, and the place for a lamp is in the darkest places. And Christians often want to leave the dark places and go to the places where there's a whole bunch of other lights. That's like going to a lamp store. No, God takes you from the lamp store to go put in a house. You go put in this room. But we like being around people who are just like us so much that we fail to exercise the gifting that God has given us, because he wants us to be bright. It may be tough, but God never called us to be comfortable. He did call us to be faithful. And I would just want to encourage everybody out there, listen, be that watchman, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might, and hang in there and recognize we do have places like this where I can look at the chat right now, both here on the app and on YouTube. A lot of people connect that way. It kind of becomes family. Listen, we can strengthen one another. You guys can. And it's one of the joys of me being able to do this and reach all over the world like this, is to help strengthen people. I don't care if you're in Australia, South Africa, if you're over in Russia or the Mideast somewhere, or the UK or Canada or Mexico or here in America, wherever it is. It's pretty cool how we can gather and strengthen each other just by this. And that strength helps you to go into a church, be strong there, be that light, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question because we're going to run out of time here real quick. Digital currency, Joe, 2023, what are your thoughts on what's coming? Because you look at all the currencies of the world, it's hard to say the dollar, comparing to all the other currencies that are out there, the dollar is really probably about as strong as you're going to get in comparison to, the whole world is so messed up right now economically. So is the dollar going to go away as we know it? What are your projections for digital currency?
You want me to beat around the bush, or you just want a straight answer?
Straight answer.
Yes, the dollar as we know it will be going away. That it shouldn't surprise anyone, because from Bible prophecy, we know that has to happen. The world economy has to change. And right now, the world economy is based on the dollar. The dollar is the base currency for the world. And the last thing that Klaus Schwab and company want is for there to be a global currency that's based on one superpower nation. So in order for them to introduce a global currency, they first have to take down the one that's in charge right now. So yes, there is a time, and I don't have a timeline on that. Depends on how quickly things go in a number of different places. But yes, there is a time coming when the US dollar will not operate the same as it does now. The fiat currency, paper money, and coins that we have now, that will go away. There will be a digital currency, is probably the best way to describe it. The central bank digital currency, or the CBDCs, are already in use in some countries. And what we see in the book of Revelation is that will shift even one more step. It won't just be digital currency like people think of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, things like that, Ethereum. It will actually have to shift one more time, because there's a problem with that. Anybody who's been involved in that market already knows cryptocurrency, digital currency, can be stolen. There's been over $300 million stolen from US-backed digital currencies already. It's already been hacked that badly. So we know that can happen. Well, how do you solve that problem? Well, we got to get rid of the digital wallets. We can't have that. You can't have credit cards. How do we do it? Well, wouldn't it be great if you could just carry it around with you somehow and didn't have to? Yeah, but then what if you lose it? What if you leave it at home? I turn around and go back home if I forget my phone. Well, I can't do that. What? Well, maybe we could we just tattoo it on you? Wouldn't that be great? And then you just have it. You wouldn't have to carry a wallet and all that. And wow, it's almost like somebody thought of that. Yeah. So yes, it has to go away because something else is coming.
This is going to put you into a box, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Oh, please.
Do you think within 5 years we're looking at this? I think there's a lot of things that still need to happen before switch is going to be flipped for the United States to just go digital currency. People, I think there's more preparation of people to accept it. It will happen, but what you think? Go ahead. Within 5 years?
The timeline is difficult. Okay. I will tell you this. It's not coming. It's already here. The 5 biggest banks in New York are already using a digital currency to exchange money between the banks. So it's faster, it's easier. They can track where it went, and they can do it instantaneously.
Yeah. So to get that into the public, that's another dynamic, though.
Within 5 years, well, obviously some things have to shift in Washington before that could happen, but is it realistic that it could happen in 5 years? Absolutely. Is it likely? As long as something doesn't get thrown into the works, then I think it is likely. That's just my opinion, but I think it is very likely within 5 years.
I'm going to go Abraham on you.
Oh, please.
How about 4 years?
Stop it.
How about 3 years? How about 3 years, Joe? Okay.
There's some things that change on that cycle. And you know what? If we were doing this show next week, Tom, the 16th is Davos.
It is.
So the World Economic Forum meets next week. You may need to have me back and discuss this next week, because if they do something really ridiculous, that could accelerate the timeline and it could happen next year.
Yep. Well, see, there you go. Thank you very much for saying that. Yep. Good old Davos and Klaus Schwab and Yuval Noah Harari and gang. Next week, they are meeting the 16th.
And I didn't get invited again. I checked my email right before we came on the air, and I still, Yuval Noah Harari didn't send me my invitation. Yeah. So I apparently I'm not going to Switzerland.
Yeah, I think they would prefer to just delete us. I did notice there's going to be 2,500 like-minded individuals that will be at that Davos meeting. Hey, everybody, by the way, so tomorrow I'll be live at 2. I also have my midweek update tomorrow. Thursday, I'm doing a special live with Don Stewart. He's going to be joining me. I'm going to ask him the question to explain. Some of you are bothered when Don said, don't say soon. Jesus coming soon, and he was trying to explain his thoughts on the language there. So I'm going to give him an opportunity to talk a little bit about that on Thursday. Plus, we're going to go over his 12, he says, the Bible and tomorrow's news, 12 biblical predictions about the last days that are now being literally fulfilled. So that'll be Thursday. Tomorrow it's me alone. Thursday it'll be, Don's going to be my guest. Okay, you ready for some questions, Joe?
Sure.
All right, let's see what we got here. Got to pull them up. You're going to have to give me a minute here. Okay, everybody, start sending your questions, everyone. Well, as people are getting ready to send in their questions, Joe, I want to touch on this with the Rapture. You were involved with the making of the Rapture kit, I believe you were. Were you involved with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I was the managing editor, so I oversaw the project. I did not do most of the writing. That was other people on that.
Okay. It's pretty neat. I remember I got to do a video on there and explain what a Watchman was. And there's people that, this is what, as people are getting ready to send in their questions, I want to say this, that I tell people this, Joe. I tell people, listen, if you're a prepper, we look at the economy, I don't think it's such a bad idea. I believe we're going to be raptured. I don't know when. You look at much of the world has always gone through suffering. Much of the Christian community throughout the history of the world, going back to the Roman Empire, has gone through a lot of suffering. What makes us in the United States think we won't go through some very difficult times before the rapture? I don't see why not. With that, I don't think it's a bad idea to have extra food on hand. I mean, right now, Joe, I'm in California. California is experiencing like the most rain like we've ever had. I mean, it's, so there's floods up north. I'm nowhere near the floods. We're way down south, but there's still rain everywhere. There's earthquakes that happen. There's hurricanes that happen other places. There's tornadoes that happen other places. I believe we all need to be prepared. But the thought of other things happening with the economy and so forth. So I don't think it's bad to have food on hand, water on hand, practical necessities for yourself, maybe even to help out your neighbor. With that, you get raptured. All your food's left behind. I tell people, Joe, well, what's going to happen with your neighbors that don't know the Lord? They're going to break into your house and take your food. But you know what? You leave things behind for them that they'll be able to come to an understanding of what's happening, like biblical messages on things like that were in the Rapture Kit and so forth and things like that. I just think it's a really practical way to go when we look at what we can do. We're actually saving up food for people to be able to break into your house, take it, and get saved. I think it's pretty cool.
That's spiritual food. It's the one they're going to need the most. There will be some folks who will find that. We encouraged people to send it to somebody because, we had some folks say, well, I want to put one on the shelf and then, I'll have this food stored up for my family. And if the rapture happens, then they'll come to our house. Well, the odds of Uncle Ernie coming from, Utah to my house in Georgia in the aftermath of the rapture, we know what that's going to be like. The chances of somebody being able to drive cross country to get to my house are pretty remote, but the people who live next door, yes, that's an excellent way to put it. If I've got things in my house, they're there for us to use. In the meantime, we lived in Florida for years, so everybody there has a hurricane disaster kit. You have a generator, you have tarps, you have extra rolls of duct tape to plug fix holes on the roof. That's just normal part of living there. You have a 5-day food supply. When we moved here, we brought all of it with us. We have solar power on our house because we want to be able to still operate the refrigerator and stuff while other people's power is out. There's some practical things, and I'm 100% in favor of that. I don't think you should get crazy. Don't go out and spend thousands of dollars hoping that your house is going to be the citadel for all of the Christians to gather and hold off the Antichrist. That's highly unlikely. But yes, some food and some things, a 3-day supply of food, medicine. If you take medication, how many folks in America take some kind of medication for blood pressure or any number of things? If you don't have a 3-day supply of that and everything shuts down, and people need to understand that's part of the digital currency is the control factor. It's not just about the money. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. It's good advice.
Yeah, the digital control factor is a huge deal from all the different laws that are going to come around that are going to affect us, the social credit system and how you play along with everything, climate laws and everything else. You're not going to be able to buy medication. So you start looking at it that way and go, there could be a problem. Okay, here's a question from Alicia Cardenas says, please advise regarding ESGs and CBDC. Do you think there could be workarounds? So I'll put it this way. This is saying, okay, let's say this comes about within the next 2 years. We're not raptured for a while still. What would be a workaround in your mind?
If you look at Revelation, is it chapter 12 or 13? I don't have it up here, and I'm in a place where I can't pull it up online, but where it talks about in that time, people will exchange a day's wages for a quart of wheat, or some Bibles say a measure of wheat.
So chapter 6, yeah.
Okay, chapter 6, thank you. If you look at the Greek there, it is equivalent to what we would call a quart. A quart of wheat, when ground and put into a situation where you could use it to make food, a quart of wheat will make about 2 loaves of bread. So it says a quart of wheat for a day's wages. Look at the direction that the trade is being made. Somebody's giving up a day's wages in order to get enough food to make 2 loaves of bread.
Yeah.
When all of that happens, things will shift like they did in every society before, in every crisis situation in Ukraine and Russia right now. It becomes a barter system. Your money won't mean anything. I have friends who think you have to own gold. I understand why they say that, because it's traditionally been a store of value, but I always ask the same question. Can you eat it? Mm-hmm. If you can't eat it and you can't live in it and you can't wear it to stay warm, then it's not going to be of any value. People are getting rid of gold in that illustration in chapter 6 in trade for food. So the gold is not the key there. It will be a barter society. And as far as workarounds, that's where have some things in store that you can use for that purpose.
Yeah. I watched Peter Schiff, Robert Kiyosaki, Dan from I Allegedly, and other guys, and they're real big on gold. And I get it for now, but I look and I thought the same thing. How am I, and I have some friends that are too, and these guys obviously are exceptionally successful, but you can't eat it, and I have a friend who he tours to Israel with me every time I go. I'll take him along, Bob Probert, and he has a book, and it was somebody from a time when the economy collapsed in Russia, and it's like 10 things you need in the time of a depression when everything collapses. And there were very interesting things on there. Tools were necessary, basic kit, first aid kits, and some of the things I can't mention, but they're tradable. But I just found it all interesting. Obviously, food, but it was really, really interesting what he had shared with me, and it was all things like that. What do you need to survive? Okay, this question kind of goes along with that. This is Susan, and she asks, question: if the elites create another crisis, couldn't digital be mandated in months and not years? And I think that's kind of what you were inferring. Look, World Economic Forum starts meeting next week, and it's a whole game changer. And things could be implemented rather rapidly in the time of a great crisis. You think?
Absolutely. All of the pieces that need to be movable pawns on the board are already in place. That's why I said that the 5 biggest banks in New York are already testing this. They've been using it for about 9 weeks, and they're already using that digital currency transferred method. That platform is already, everything's working. So it's just a matter of pushing it to the individual user level, and they will just tell you, oh yeah, sorry, stop using that debit card. It's not going to work. And then there'll be a crisis. When the crisis happens, then you'll turn to somebody for a solution, and they will magically have one.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see as everything continues to develop as we move forward. Joe, it was wonderful having you on here for the first time. Looking forward to seeing you again and connecting with you at one of the conferences, wherever that may be also. You have any closing thoughts for everybody?
I would say what I tell all watchmen, just this is a time where the decay is evident. We got to be salt. The darkness is deepening. It's more crucial than any time in history for us to be light. It's time for watchmen to watch, warn, witness, and finish well.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, Joe, for being with me, being my guest on here today. And listen, everybody, I will be live again tomorrow, 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Oh, I forgot to mention this. We have our new website up. I totally forgot about that. Just got launched last night while we were sleeping in America. So it's up and running. Check it out, hopeforourtimes.com. I think you're really going to like it a lot. And so we have that. We have the app. We're making some more advances too. And so 2 o'clock tomorrow, plus we'll have a 1 o'clock midweek update, 2 o'clock again with Don Stewart on Thursday. Got a busy week, but check out the app. Please do check out the website if you haven't done it yet. I think you're going to like it. And one final thing, if you want to go to Israel with me in May, I do have registration that is opened up. It's going to be a very small group. It's one bus only. And so we just open it up. If you want to go, sign up. It will fill up. And when it fills up, I'm not adding another bus. So just so you know, I'd love to see you in May on no short notice. I hope you can join me. And that's on the website and the app too. God bless you, everybody. See you tomorrow.